So let's do a roundup of Warhammer relevant releases, a big new upgrade sprue with a bunch of melee weapons, a slightly crazy popular launch for some third-party parts to make Blood Angels look blingier, a big unveiling of 40k related merch, and a fair bit more. Time for a Warhammer news roundup. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today I'm doing a roundup of a bunch of Warhammer news things, a few articles, reveals and teasers that we saw over the week, though none of which really warranted an entire video to talk about them. Jumping straight in, and one thing that I thought was kind of interesting for both Warhammer 40k and Heresy era players alike, this is essentially the Heresy era melee weapon sprue. Previously they only had them in resin, I believe, and it's been kind of long overdue really for the new plastic incarnation for the Heresy to be able to properly equip a bunch of assault marines on foot and things without having to pay rather painful Forge World resin prices. I guess that the price for this one will be around £30, $47 or €37 if it's the same as the special weapon set. I feel like there's at least a good chance that it will be, but it does seem to have quite a few more components than that one, so I guess we'll wait and see. At least I suppose a fair few of the components are spare arms for this one, so you never know, Games Workshop might be lenient and keep it at the same price. As it goes for a Warhammer upgrade sprue, this is perhaps one of the more generous ones out there. All in all, he gets 12 power weapons of various flavours, 10 chainswords, 2 thunder hammers, and 4 power fists with the optional bits to make them lightning claws for Heresy, a couple of power lances, a couple of two-handed heavy chainswords, and then a bunch of pistols with a few open hands and melter bombs and other bits. I feel like it's the sort of mini armory that might interest a few 40k players out there. Quite good material for kit bashing cool characters, or making certain squads like certain veteran type units, or maybe things like Chaos Chosen out of other models, maybe Black Templar Sword Brethren. I feel like it's the sort of selection that people might be tempted to pick up box sets such as the Space Marine Vanguard Veterans or the now retired Blood Angels Death Company to get. As reaction goes for Games Workshop upgrade sprues and things, it seems to have been fairly positive for this one. A fair bunch of Heresy players have been waiting on this for really quite some time now. It does look interesting enough that it could have some use for the 40k setting. I guess for that you just use the hands and the weapons and just ignore the arms that it comes with, at least if you're trying to equip Primaris Marines with these. Let me know your thoughts though, or do you have use for these bits? Next up, over the past day or so I'd seen a couple of interesting social media posts about the issue 5 of the Combat Patrol magazine. This one's the one with that unique Infernus Space Marine Sergeant. It's been out in the shops in the UK this week, kind of harder to find than the rest, as a lot of people are seeming to try and hunt it down for the unique sculpt, basically whatever it is. This one was always going to be in big demand, even if he's not his own in-game unit and is basically an aesthetic upgrade for Infernus Marines. People do seem to go kind of mad for unique Space Marine sculpts, and this one's no exception. It's got him changing the canister on his Pyre Blaster and stomping a burning Tyrannid into the dirt. What I did find kind of curious though was I saw multiple different posts on social media for people who are basically being kit bashing and converting him into other things. In some cases just basically taking off all the parts that made him in any way different from a standard intercessor and then equipping him from there. I can absolutely see why people would do this if he came with the subscription and you didn't really value him for the aesthetic upgrades. Maybe trying to kit bash a fun Space Marine character like a lieutenant could be good, but at the same time it does make me wince just a little bit when you see someone buy a magazine for £10 with a single Space Marine in it. A Space Marine that, for weird arbitrary collector type reasons, is valued on eBay for around about £22 in the UK, including postage and packaging, just literally because he's a rare miniature. And then the presumably new and enthusiastic Warhammer collector gets a hold of it, chops off all the bits that make him into an expensive miniature in the first place, and then essentially uses him as an intercessor body for conversion, which you should be able to get for £4 each, even if you buy the entire intercessor box at full price from Games Workshop. To be fair, I'm sure that's absolutely the right thing to do for some people. If they can't be bothered to resell him and buy some different Marines, or kit bashing him into another character might save them the money of getting that character in the future, it totally makes sense, plus it's just kind of fun. But I did find that was an interesting place where a bunch of enthusiastic newer players to 40k have a very different interpretation of a model, compared with more seasoned veterans who maybe take their collecting all a bit seriously. Next up, I'll talk about the Blood Angels relevant phenomenon who kindly reached out to sponsor the video, that I'm sure some of you Sons of Sanguinius out there will have some good use for, but I also think it's just a really interesting case study in the new world that Games Workshop has to deal with, and a genuine time when 3D printing might have quite a lot of people turning to that as opposed to official Games Workshop models. This morning sees the main Blood Angels release, which while they certainly had some really cool models, people largely enjoyed the characters a fair bit, but it's safe enough to say that there were a few miniatures that had a massive amount of criticism, particularly the new Sanguinary Guard here, bereft of their wings, looking a little bit Age of Sigmar with the Death Mask ones, and notably smooth chest pieces. Community reaction to them really wasn't good, most people preferring the old miniatures, and it was kind of similar with the kind of bland Death Company that don't really have any specific Death Company parts, just some Blood Angels bits that you can include from the upgrade sprue. The issue that Games Workshop now has, though, when they're releasing miniature waves like this, is that what if someone out there with a 3D printer decides to come along and just basically do things better, but will also be intelligent about it, keeping their parts and models not too close to Games Workshop that they've got any sort of legal recourse or IP or copyright claims against them, but nonetheless, even within those limitations, can step up to fill a big gap in the demands of hobbyists. For example, give the Sanguinary Guard their wings back and add a whole bunch of cool themed stuff besides. In one of the single most financially successful examples of this so far, here are the Crimson Lords from Greytide Studio, who sponsored the video, who are basically making a whole bunch of Angelic Heroes and Power Armor style miniatures, compatible with Games Workshop miniatures, and could potentially add a bit more theme to Bland Primaris, though I'm sure you could use them for other miniatures as well. The thing that really struck me about this campaign is they're basically doing a sort of Kickstarter style campaign on My Mini Factory, the 3D printing STL hosting website, and that campaign has raised a ridiculously spectacular $92,000 worth of funding, around about 2,400 people backing it, which to be honest I feel like for the size of the overall Blood Angels community worldwide, that has to be a pretty hefty chunk of them already. I'm sure it would have done absolutely fine on its own, but it looks like fuel to the fire has been poured on by working with a whole bunch of other well-known 40k YouTubers too. I feel like the number just speaks a lot to people's demand for this sort of thing though. Literally pretty much an economic problem of solving something that a lot of hobbyists want, and their ways to get the parts for either a $39 offering for all the bits included in the Kickstarter style pledge via their Elite set, or a whole bunch of physical bits, packs and parts from Only Games, the print-on-demand 3D printing people. I'll leave links to both down in the video description. I won't go through their entire range right now, just pick out a few highlights. They've got a good selection of heads. I quite like the sort of death mask style ones on the top centre. I like the rather theatrical looking half masks as well. There's a bunch of pauldrons as another good place to add a bunch of theme to a model, a few with some nice crosses and a bunch of skulls. There's some themed backpacks with a bunch of wings and symbols and grails, a bunch of themed and stylized jetpacks, though perhaps most importantly there's the cool winged ones, these ones going for a dual thruster kind of design, and I must admit I feel like these ones look pretty effective. I feel like there might have been far less complaints if Games Workshop had made something like this for the new Sanguinary Guards. Loads of other stuff besides though. Here's a few claws and fists, there's a whole bunch of pistols, massive amounts of close combat weapons with swords, axes and chainswords and things, and a fair few stylized hammers and shields. Finally, for a few individual offerings, there's a Dreadnought compatible pack, a bunch of skulls and somber stylings here which could be in line with Death Company maybe. A couple of character packs which can be bought individually as well, could be nice to upgrade a basic trooper into a fancy character of some description. And I must admit I feel like they've done quite well with the people they commissioned to paint some test models of these, they're looking rather stunning. In any case, feel free to check them out down in the video description, either for the 3D printed STL files which are available for $40 for basically everything here, or the physical packs that you can buy to get the bits individually. For the most part they tend to be at least fairly reasonable prices. For example, this particular one is $18 or £14 for a bunch of jetpacks and weapons and things, though bear in mind shipping can add a bit to any orders here. In any case though, I must admit the sheer scope of this release is just pretty impressive. Just crazy that it seems that they've released far more content than Games Workshop have for the recent Blood Angels release, even if I guess they're a bit more limited having to produce things in entire big plastic kits as opposed to more individualised parts. Getting back to more official Warhammer releases once more, and this weekend is Games Workshop's Warhammer Day weekend. Hopefully they should have some fun model reveals for us later in the day, though it seems they kick things off on Friday with a whole bunch of announcements, mainly focused around Warhammer 40k merch. I feel like these might have a bit more niche appeal, but when they make something that you absolutely like the look of for specifically your chosen faction, I feel like there's quite a lot of scope for wanting something cool to sit on the shelf. The first one with these Weta Workshop heads, which make the incredibly expensive but pretty awesome looking big polystone statues. They had the Abaddon the Despoiler and Lieutenant Titus ones. They were a massive $1,900 or $1,200 respectively. They're based in New Zealand, but those prices are US dollars. Now though, it seems that they're following that up with a bunch of Space Marine heads for display, if you just want a little bit of the display statue sort of action. And it seems they've come out with a Blood Angels one, Dark Angels one, and a Khorne Berserker. I think they look nice enough, though out of the three of them, I feel like I wouldn't really want to pay £70 or £80 for the Primaris heads out of these. I feel like the Khorne Berserker one is a bit of an order of magnitude more impressive. I guess that might be of interest to some Chaos fans out there, looking to collect one particular skull for the Skull Throne. Otherwise, they showcased that 40k Ultimate Guide, which they talked about in a previous Warhammer community article. This one by Guy Haley and Gav Thorpe of Black Library, made by DK here in the UK, best known for their encyclopedias. And it seems to be on sale right now, £35 on the DK website or £27 on Amazon for 25% off, weirdly enough. The book really is quite a massive one, a huge amount of annotated pretty pictures, the Space Marine one perhaps being a good example. The idea seems to be that they tell the story with Warhammer 40k photoed models, the sort that you get on the actual miniature box sets, and then having a whole bunch of lore details and things about the guys in the universe. It seems that they're broadly focusing on that more so than the either collecting or gaming aspect for the most part. I feel like as it goes in terms of Warhammer content and sheer amount of book for the money, it's funny that this seems to be really quite a lot more pages than you get for the amount invested than virtually most books through Games Workshop. Perhaps could be an interesting enough nice thing to have as a Christmas present or something like that, I guess. Though in the article they did say that it's just out in the UK at the moment and it's going to come to other places around the world in due course but isn't out yet. Otherwise unveiled is a McFarlane Toys Lieutenant Titus miniature. This one seemingly coming with a nice Thunderhammer and a bolter option. I feel like his unhelmeted version is maybe looking a little bit chubby about the face though. Again, could be a fun enough collector's thing for people who are no doubt getting plenty of play out of the Space Marine game right now. Looks like this one's $30 on pre-order from Amazon, though it's not releasing until December the 15th. There were a few more bits besides as well, the Space Marine game soundtrack on vinyl. And they had a feature for a bunch of previous Warhammer computer games as well, including an anniversary edition for Dawn of War 2, and apparently paired with a bunch of sales on with Steam and a bunch of other places to get games. Could be worth checking out if you happen to have any titles that you really had your eye on and wanted to play at some point. Otherwise, for Warhammer news things over the week, it looks like Kill Team has had its app and faction rules go live. Games Workshop said that the faction rules would be free for Kill Team, and there's 33 Kill Teams worth of ones to download. The app itself seems to be super basic, essentially just a PDF viewer, and a level below ones like the 40k one, but I guess that maybe is all it really needs to be, if its purpose is just for viewing rules and showing the most up-to-date ones. Kill Team has been kind of notable for one of Games Workshop's bigger and more supported game offerings, but they said they would basically be free rules for each Kill Team out there, which will be accessible via a QR code on the kits that are sold with them, or just go to the Warhammer website, or indeed the new app. As best I can tell though, it still looks like some of Kill Team's rules might actually be paywalled after all. Unless I'm missing something, they don't actually have the full download for the Kill Team core rules. They basically just have a light version of the rules that you can get the overview and general gist from, but it's literally only 3 pages long, and it doesn't cover things like, say, missions for example, or ways to play the co-op game mode. So if that literally is all it is, then he still needs to actually pick up the Kill Team rulebook, unless they're planning to release that individually, which to my understanding they're probably not. If so, that perhaps would be a little bit of a shame. I generally got the impression that the entirety of Kill Team would be free on online, but I would still say that's probably better than having the individual rules parcelled out in small increments. I guess at least the idea could be that you could pick up the core book, and then that'd be your main rules purchase, though I guess they'd probably have seasonal content as well, I guess. I guess maybe it's partly because there's no real reasonable way to deliver rules content for Kill Team for the smaller ones. You don't really have that many pages worth of rules. It just seems a bit less likely that people are going to buy codex-style books to govern the rules for sorts of models that might cost similar or maybe even less than the rulebook itself. It does make me wonder if Games Workshop might do this for 40k or Age of Sigmar at some stage in the future, though I guess codexes have got more content in them, and I'm sure Games Workshop pulls in a lot of money from codex sales they don't want to get rid of. I did put a community post up in the not too distant past, asking people whether or not they'd be tempted to pay for a rules subscription app if it say came baked into Warhammer Plus in some way. I feel like that might be a first step as a bit of a halfway house to that, though I think that would have its problems as well. probably a lot more worth it to people who've got loads of different armies and don't want to pick up 10 codexes each edition, but far less to people who just have the one, perhaps. Finally, for the main things that I wanted to focus on, Games Workshop showed off a Road to Cassandra's Grand Narrative event in an article earlier in the week. The Grand Narrative basically being a big in-person event that runs parallel to their World Champions of Warhammer type thing for the competitive folks. They're both happening towards the end of November, held in Atlanta, Georgia in the USA. I feel like there often tends to be a fair bit of discourse about Games Workshop focusing too much on competitive play, and I sort of wonder if this is one of the things that they're doing to try and counter that a bit. They've done these, I think, for the last couple of years now, and this one's an event for Warhammer 40k and Kill Team. They've released a bunch of event packs and things for it, with a system for Lords of War faction leaders that can be characters in-game and have their fate altered, and Vox Localum essentially being event staff, managing a bunch of their subordinates as the attendees of the event. The idea is that it all comes together and there's a few branching paths a storyline could take, determined by a bunch of narrative outcomes and things that happen in certain games of 40k and Kill Team across the entire system, and it affects a little bit of 40k canon into the future. The narrative for this one is set in the Cassandra system, which is the one with the great gun in the Kill Team Hivestorm trailer. So I guess it's trying to tell the story of the wider conflict in and around that great gun on Volcus. It will be interesting to see if anything particularly meaningful comes out of it for the wider 40k narrative, though it basically is a system that hadn't been heard of before Games Workshop unveiled it with the Kill Team release. In any case, it sounds like this one will be one in a series of articles to try and get other people a bit more engaged and interested with the story. That maybe feels like it's a little bit harder to get involved with just glimpses of the lore. I don't know if they'll release some missions for other folks to play. They did one of these last year where they did post a debrief after the games had happened with the fate of a few of the major characters, which did look kind of interesting but maybe wasn't super clear to an outside observer what it all meant really, so it felt a bit more aimed at people who actually went to the event in person. I don't know if this one might be a little bit easier to understand, as they've actually done a little bit more legwork establishing lore and the major release with the cinematic trailer set on the world. So maybe it does have the potential to feel a little bit more impactful than some, depending on what they choose to do with it. I feel like they kind of did something a bit similar with the start campaign for Leviathan with Space Marines against Tyranids. To my understanding, the main outcome of that campaign and the lore change was just that one outlying world got eaten by Tyranids rather than holding for the Imperium. I feel like maybe it's hard to have these campaigns and narrative events really resonate wider into the collective consciousness if that's what they want to do. In any case though, I'll leave that one there for now. What do you make of new upgrades, fancy Blood Angels bits, Infernus Marine conversions and merch things? Look forward to hearing all your thoughts down in the comments below. A big thank you to Greytide Studio and the Crimson Lords for sponsoring the video. Feel free to check out their links down in the video description. In any case, I'll aim to be back for the big reveals hopefully happening tonight and to see what Games Workshop has for 40k and Kill Team, so feel free to check back if you'd like to see that. And otherwise check out the other bits down in the video description. The channel does have a Patreon page if you'd like to help support and keep the videos coming. That's got entry to giveaways and a fair few other bits. And if you were thinking about picking up any of the new Blood Angel stuff that should have gone up for pre-order at this point, there's a bunch of discount retailers down there as well. In any case though, an absolutely massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.